of a pause while it starts to go live. So I am going to be live. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Beth. I'm the operations manager at the Project Brighton, and love to welcome all of you and our panelists for this conversation for Mental Health Awareness Week. At the project, we take mental health incredibly seriously. From the beginning, we've worked to support our members holistically, helping them to look after themselves as well as their businesses, and offering a rounded programme of events to support work, rest and play, because we know that all of these things are vital for our happiness and our success. As many of you will know, the theme of this week's Mental Health Awareness Week is kindness, and we all know that kindness has a huge impact on our mental health. However, for kindness to be an integral part of our system, structures and regular interactions, every aspect of our society has to be committed to embedding it within everything we do. That's why we brought together an expert panel to talk about how we can do that here in Brighton. So I'm very pleased to welcome Sophie Holmes, who is a clinical psychologist and Deputy Director for Psychology and Psychological Therapies for Sussex Partnership NHS Trust. We've got Elaine Ortiz, who is the founder of the Hummingbird Project, working to protect young refugees. We have Sharon Munnings from the Brighton Housing Trust. And we have Mo Kanjilal, co-creator of Watch This Space, and Ruben Davidson, LGBT youth development worker at All Sorts. Thank you so much all for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So for those of you watching live, if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please do use the chat function, and we will do our best to include as many of you as we can, because we really want to have as many voices involved in this conversation as possible. So, Sophie, can I start by asking you about the challenges we currently face? Do you believe that we're generally suffering with more mental health problems as a society?
I think it's a really interesting question, because we're certainly talking about it a lot more, aren't we? We're really interested in it a lot more. People are coming out publicly and telling people when they've had experiences of mental health difficulties in a way that I don't think we've really seen before. And I think that's really helpful, because it means people are able to get support, not necessarily just from services, but from each other and from colleagues, and just all those things are really helpful. Whether actual number of mental health problems is increasing, I think, is more debatable. I think it's quite hard to judge, isn't it? How do we compare what life's like now and counting how many people have depression now with how you might have done that 100 years ago, when there was a lot more shame and stigma around for mental health? So it's quite a hard one to tease out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Well, the other thing is, are we experiencing more because of COVID? I'm not sure if that's where you were.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm interested in. I was going to ask you next. So do you kind of seen what has been the correlation between sort of mental health issues and the pandemic? I've read so many different things. Yeah. I wonder what your thoughts might be.
It's quite early days, I think, because I think you could argue at the moment we're just coming out of what's been quite a crisis for us in terms of managing and trying to make sure that we're all quite robust and resilient and able to cope with the increased number of infections. And what we do know with anything that's difficult for our society, whatever kind of disaster, whether it's a pandemic or something else, is that actually in the initial stages, people are really exhausted, and they're just dealing with the day job, and they're trying to make sure that they're safe and that their families are safe. So in some ways you wouldn't expect self-reported mental health difficulties just right now, because people are still at the tail end of dealing with some really difficult situations, particularly in our acute hospitals. So I think what we're going to see is more of those difficulties emerging over the next few months. And that's what we're getting ready for within Sussex Partnership Trust, because we're anticipating the number of people coming forward and saying they need help will increase. But having said that, there are some specific issues that are definitely increasing, like the experience of people that are experiencing domestic violence, for instance. So there are some really important things. We mustn't just say, oh yeah, everything's fine. It's not fine. I think we're just in a bit of a developing situation. And what we're anticipating is that we will end up with people that have had some really difficult consequences of having been in lockdown. And lockdown affects us all so differently, doesn't it? And some people are really embracing it and enjoying it, and other people are losing their jobs, struggling with loss of contact with relatives or friends. And so it's a very big spectrum, I think. So I think it's inevitable we are going to see an increase. We've also, I mean, the other thing you'll probably be aware of is there's been a bit of a reluctance on the part of the public to be asking for help, because from GPs or from A&E, the message has been, don't go to the health service, don't ask for help from your normal ways. And of course, we're now realizing that what's happened is that people have put it sort of at the back of their priority list, and then ending up possibly more severely physically unwell, or potentially their mental health difficulties can be worsened. So it's a really difficult balancing act between, you know, we want to be able to say to people, reach out and come and get help. But obviously, while we were in the midst of the increased numbers of COVID infections, we had to be reassigning staff to be looking after the people with those illnesses. It's a rather long answer. Sorry, Beth.
No, thank you so much for being so thorough. Obviously, the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week this year is kindness. Kindness, when we really started thinking about it, is so far-reaching, the effects that kindness can have. As a mental health professional, what role do you think kindness plays in supporting?
Oh, it's enormously important, isn't it? I don't think you need to be a mental health professional to know that. I think we know that, don't we? It's enormously important, and having some generosity of your spirit and some having tolerance for others is really very important in terms of interpersonal relationships. Having kindness in the response of some difficult situations we're experiencing makes us all feel more resilient, doesn't it? You can deal with things if you know people are going to give you a kind response. And with people talking about it a lot at the moment, because we're seeing such extraordinary levels of community kindness. You know, I think that's just so such a positive, isn't it, out of what is such a difficult situation, is we're actually seeing people pull together, offering to do shopping for people, pick up prescriptions, phoning into neighbours they've never spoken to before. I mean, it's just an enormous range of things people are doing, which you think, actually, isn't this lovely that we can see our fellow people as really caring and kind for each other? Isn't that going to be of enormous benefit to all of us? And there's something about, we're all in this together. Everybody is dealing with the same problem. That's quite different to usually when you're seeing people with difficulties. Their difficulties are quite unique to them. At the moment, everybody's having to cope with the fear of catching the virus, or the concerns about being in lockdown. To some extent, sharing those things makes it easier for us all to pull together. Kindness is such an important attribute in these times, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sophie. Gonna come back to you in a little bit. Elaine, you are the founder of the Hummingbird Project, and you work with young refugees. These people, so sadly, in our media, are often excluded and demonized. And how can we encourage people to show more kindness to those that are so often othered?
I guess firstly, we just need to understand what kind of issues are, young refugees or refugees in general are facing. The people that we work with have fled their countries due to war, well-founded fear of persecution. And they've often, mostly the young people that we've worked with have travelled across the world on their own as children, and then got to the UK. And sometimes not having the language or family connections. And, a lot of our young people having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They've got separation issues. Their family members might have died, or they might just be in a different country. They're in a very, very difficult situation. And then they come to the UK with the hope of, having some rights and protections here, and then the system treats them very badly. For many of our young people, they wait years for their asylum claims. They're unable to move on with their lives. They're unable sometimes to even make connections because they're separated in classes due to their language barriers and lots of other different issues. So, you know, I think the most significant thing that we can do for people in these situations is offer real human connections. So by that, I mean friendships. So, you know, if you can imagine being in a similar situation, or even not, like, let's make it more realistic to our kind of privileged lives. You know, if you've moved to a new area and you've got no friends, or you've just had, you know, a significant breakup or some kind of bereavement, you know, the true act of kindness of just reaching out and saying, how are you doing, would you like to come for a cup of tea, or, you know, is there anything that I can do for you, or can I help you with anything, or just kind of like making friends with somebody is the most powerful way of supporting people going through hard times. And there's different ways that we can do that in our community. You know, we have, for young people, we have a session every Monday which is all about friendship. It's called Global Social Club, and it's where young people can come and meet with people from around the world and make friends. And there's a similar service for adults. So in the Cowley Club on Tuesdays, I think, there's Jollof Cafe, which is similar to Global Social Club, which is all about making friends with people from around the world. And I just think that's such a powerful tool to help people through difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly like at the moment, how are the young people that you're working with coping? I mean, I imagine that's been an extreme challenge in the time of social isolation for the young people that you're with.
It's been really interesting and quite inspiring, actually, because our young people have gone through hell already, and they've dealt with much bigger things like, you know, losing their family members and war and conflict. And actually, we can learn an awful lot from our young people and their resilience. They've actually coped pretty well, and they're, you know, supporting other young people and people around them, and they've kind of formed quite a tight community, which is really amazing to see. Yeah, so I mean, there is still the ongoing issues of you know, what's going on in their lives, that, you know, the loss of family members and loved ones in their home countries, and the treatment of, you know, the UK asylum system, the immigration system is still there, but actually they're coping incredibly well.
It's really good to hear. I'm going to come back to you in a little bit, Elaine. Thank you. Sharon, we know that people who experience mental health problems are at a greater risk of homelessness, and at the same time, homelessness and housing insecurities is likely to have a detrimental impact on people's mental health. Can you talk a little bit about the link between housing and mental health and the services that Brighton Housing Trust provides?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think mental health has an intrinsic link in everything. I think certainly the impact of trauma and how that can affect mental health. Certainly accommodation and homelessness, if you think about how important it is to have a solid foundation on which to build your life. If you don't have that foundation, then it will be incredibly difficult for you to have the inner resources, the financial resources, the networks around you to rebuild a life that you may have had before. Many people that we see who are now homeless previously haven't been homeless, and there are some people who have been homeless for very many years for a whole range of different reasons. The services that I'm responsible for in Brighton Housing Trust are specifically accommodation-based services for people with mental health issues. And often our clients have either been either homeless themselves, or they've been in hospital for a really long time, or some of them have been in prison. Often the thread throughout most of our clients is that at some point in their lives, or at repeated times throughout their lives, they have experienced some form of trauma which has severely impacted their life as they've progressed into adults. And in terms of kindness, one of the things that we always try and do is build a very meaningful connection between the worker working with the client. And there's often a phrase used about people that don't engage in support, almost like it's their problem that they're not engaging, whereas actually as an organization, that's our cue to think, what can we do differently in order that we can then engage them? We have to kind of show them that we are worthy of them opening up. And people who've experienced trauma, there is a corresponding link to how much they're willing to trust people and services And rightly so. You know, some people have been very marginalized, some people have been incredibly fearful at different times in their lives, and then they come into a service, and then we kind of hope and in some ways expect for them to just instantly connect with us. So I think the work that we do is very much, if somebody is in our accommodation, then we have a duty, and rightfully so, for us to do everything we can to help them to keep their accommodation. And so if as a result of their mental health or their substance use or any other reason that can impact on their behaviour, for want of a better word, our response to that is to see that as a support need and something that we need to do to help them, rather than thinking they're not good enough or safe enough or well enough to be in this service. And so we always work really creatively to think, what does that person need at that time? And the only way that we get to know that is by asking the person. And so sometimes it can take us months to build a relationship with that person. And, you know, we're a large organization, we have lots of different services. But the thing that we always do is make sure that decisions are made on a case-by-case basis, and we look at that one individual. Why are they responding like that? What is their history? What do they need? How can we deliver what they need? And I think accommodation is so important. And I think kindness shown to people who are homeless, people who are insecurely housed, I think it's such an important thing, because I think it makes people feel that they matter. And often I think people can assume that someone on the street, they're instantly, without even asking, that they're begging for money, and the assumption that they're going to spend that money on using substances. And actually, sometimes people would just benefit from a conversation. Even without asking, sometimes people put their hand up quite dismissively and say, sorry, I haven't got any change. And they may not even have asked them. So yes, I'm going off on a tangent, I'm aware of that. But yes, mental health, accommodation, and I think also seeing somebody as a whole person. A person isn't their mental health, a person isn't their physical health, a person isn't the homeless person sat in front of you. It's the person who is homeless, but they're not the homeless. They're individual people with an individual story, and what they need is as individual to them as it is to us. And I think we can no longer separate mental health from substance use, from homelessness, from physical health. Everything is combined and entwined, and the more we can be very aware of that, the more we can really see people for who they really are. I will stop now.
No, Sharon, I think you made just the most important point about just you know, if you're just putting yourself in someone's shoes who's already struggling with so many different things, and then trying to reach out to someone, trying to make a connection to someone. And if someone I'm just imagining if I started to have a conversation with someone and they put their hand up to my face and said, you know, no. For me, I'd find that so distressing, and it's just those tiny little moments that can, you know, start to break people. But equally, it can be those tiny little moments of saying, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" Something like that. That is so beneficial to all of us, every single human being. Alongside the fact that you are not your circumstances, you are not just this. None of us would say that about ourselves. We absolutely shouldn't be labeling as a whole anybody who is, you know, struggling with their housing. I mean, it's awful. So thank you, Sharon. We're going to touch a little bit further on those points, but thank you for elaborating further. Mo, thanks for joining us. So part of your work with Watch This Space, which I'm sure you're going to tell us about, is in helping businesses to make sure more diverse voices are heard within the organisation. How can we encourage a wider variety of voices and ideas in our community?
Yeah, so Watch This Space is something we've been working on during lockdown with those people that have been creating something during that time. And it's because we've all felt, that those of us involved have all felt that for a long time, the workplace doesn't suit everybody and it doesn't make everybody feel included. So the kind of work structures that we have been designed a long time ago, and it's very different now, and there are all different kinds of people, and actually so many things about how we work don't suit everybody. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we're working on, is how workplaces can be more inclusive in every way. So in how people work, in where they work, in who does what as well. So in terms of wider voices, you often find in companies that it's certain people that get the stage in a meeting, for example, or certain people that get to progress because of who they know maybe, and those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things we want to look at. And there's some really interesting and quite scary stats around all of that. So 1 in 6 people in a survey done in 2018, 1 in 6 people are not happy in their job. So that's quite staggering, really, because you spend so much time at work, and to have 1 in 6 people not feeling happy is, you know, without doubt going to have an impact on people's mental health. And there are some other things that are interesting in terms of the fact that one of the biggest killers of men under 45 is suicide. So many men at work will tell you, there's another survey which had very high stats, I think it was about 90% have been told to man up. So there's all kinds of stats that lead to mental health problems caused in the workplace. And in terms of wider voices, it's about thinking about things differently. It's about what are the skills required for that task, rather than who is the person that most looks like the person we think should be doing that, for example. And that's really what we want to address, because I think there has to be, so if we think about the kind of companies I'm used to working with, where they're creating products or software, you want the most inventive sort of creations. You want them to be really creative. If you want that, then it makes sense that you need a wide range, as wide a range as possible, of voices and perspectives for those things to happen. And that isn't what happens in many organizations right now. So to do that, I think the ways to make people feel more included are about thinking about how we engage with people, how things are done in companies, how young people are brought into the workplace, and how they're helped with their careers. And, you know, there's so many different aspects that we need to flip and change so that we create a kind of society.
Absolutely, and I imagine as one of the biggest challenges for the work that you're doing will be to convince the existing owners of business that this is what they absolutely need to be doing. So that's going to be really interesting work that I'd love to kind of chat to you about a little bit later. Just going to introduce Ruben. So Ruben, could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do, and also how important a factor kindness is for the mental health of the people that you work with?
Sure. So I work for All Sorts Youth Project. We support children and young people between the ages of 5 and 26 that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, other sexual or gender minorities, and young people that are unsure as well. We also support parents that have trans children, and we do lots of work with professionals around Sussex and beyond that have the potential to work with LGBT young people. And that's pretty much anyone that has the potential to work with any young people. And All Sorts has been around for about 20 years, and we've expanded into West Sussex from Brighton and Hove as well, and we're looking to expand a little bit more. Because the need is so high. LGBT young people are everywhere, and sometimes cities like Brighton have more provision for those young people than more rural communities. If you think about other parts of Sussex can be very rural at times. So we want to reach out to those young people. I think kindness is a really interesting point, because it's something that everybody can relate to. And I think anyway, that everybody can relate to kindness, receiving kindness, being kind to others. And actually a lot of the young people that we support have experienced like quite severe prejudice about their sexual orientation or gender identity. We survey our young people about every 6 months, and the most recent one we did, we surveyed about 70 All Sorts service users, and found that 1 in 4 of them had experienced LGBT phobia from within their home. And if you think about lockdown, that's 1 in 4 of our young people, or LGBT young people in general, living in challenging circumstances during lockdown. And it's a kindness kind of, I think we shouldn't think of kindness as being kind to strangers, but also kind to classmates, to our family, to our siblings, our partners. There's everybody deserves kindness. I actually really love the theme of this mental health week, because I think it is something so relatable, and it kindness has such an impact on people's mental health and well-being. And LGBT young people are significantly more at risk of mental health issues, self-harm, suicidal ideation than their non-LGBT peers. So it's important to remember that they are already a vulnerable group of young people. So these have been challenging times, and we've moved our service online to engage our young people in the best way that we can on Zoom and email, on the phone, and social media. We started an Instagram, which the young people have been very excited about, long time coming. So I guess we want to reach kindness to our young people in lots of different forms. We can't see them face to face, so what else can we do? And that's kind of what we've been focusing on, really.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruben. It's amazing work, and I was just about to say, like, what can we do better to make kindness more present for the young people that you work with? And I imagine, like you say, the response has been to your Instagram, it's like reaching out in so many different ways. Are there any? I mean, like you say, all young, everybody deserves some kindness, but are there any other ways, in your opinion, to make kindness more available for young people?
Oh, what a good question.
Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot.
No, not at all. The first thing that comes to mind is about the amount of young people that hear the word gay used as a negative in their sort of school environments, in their friend groups, and their families. So it's raining, that's so gay, or, you know, something else is going on, that's really gay. And actually that's still really prevalent. You know, it's kind of, it's not that shocking to me anymore because I've been doing work with schools for a long time. But often when I meet professionals that work in those schools, and I say, actually, I've spoken to a lot of LGBT young people that attend the school, and they say that they hear, you know, homo, bi, and transphobic language very regularly or almost daily. The staff themselves are quite surprised. So there's an activity that we do called obliteration, where there's a picture of a young person, and we get young people in our workshop to write down all the horrible words that they've ever heard used for LGBT people, and we put them on post-it notes, and eventually that young person is covered by all those words. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But then we talk about how challenging homo, bi, and transphobia, and saying actually using gay as a negative is not acceptable, that's homophobic, which isn't acceptable in our school or youth group or family or whatever space. Actually, it peels those words away, and you can start to see that young person underneath all of those terms again. So I think there is something kind that everybody can do, and some of that is about holding people accountable for their language and their actions, and we should be allies to all minority groups and equality groups, including women. But I think, you know, working in LGBT services with LGBT young people, I really see how those small things can snowball and impact the young person in really serious ways while they're developing over time. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. Hopefully that was an okay suggestion.
No, that's great, Ruben. Thank you so much. That is really interesting, isn't it? I think it's so often, as any young person, I think we all remember those kind of like throwaway comments from people, and everyone,
Absolutely.
and you, people think, oh, I've just said something, and then they never think about it again, but they do, they stick to you.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone to remove that label or that word from someone is such a powerful thing. So I think that's amazing work, even that very small example. So thank you so much, Ruben. Sophie, just to come back to you, we're talking about showing kindness to others, but many of us struggle showing kindness to ourselves. And that's a pretty big factor in our mental well-being, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's a really interesting point there about the kindness being such a valuable way of supporting and helping people. It really strikes me that there's quite often an idea that, you know, if you've got mental health difficulties, you need services or you need therapy. And actually there's some really good examples from everybody that's been talking this afternoon about how powerful it is if you can actually just stop and be nice to somebody, or be given the time of day, or smile at them in the street when they're homeless. You know, it's just such powerful behavior that we can all engage in.
Absolutely.
And absolutely we need to be thinking about it for ourselves too. In some ways it can feel easier, can't it, to reach out to others and to do for others. And I think at this time we've been working quite hard at Sussex Partnership about giving that message out to our staff. You know, you're not going to be able to look after people if you can't take care of yourself, and working yourself into the ground because you see so much need. It's very tempting, isn't it? It's very tempting when you see so much distress, but actually if you end up exhausted and unable to function, you're not going to be of any use to anyone. So really, we've got to start with ourselves, haven't we?
Yeah, so it's so interesting that why so often it's that like the hardest thing.
Yeah,
taking some good advice for yourself, but quite often we're all really good at kind of sharing some good best practice. I mean, is there any specific reason why it's harder to be kind to ourselves than it is to others?
There's something about that generosity to others that is quite easy, isn't it? And if you're feeling quite harsh and critical to yourself, you're going to find it hard to be kind to yourself. It feels like it's quite a profound trait for all of us, of that looking after others or being altruistic to different degrees, obviously, but it's part of what we are socialized or encouraged to be right from day one. We need to look after each other, whether it's our younger siblings or our friends at school. We're all taught that it's good to look after people, and we are social animals. It's very strong, isn't it? Whereas that kind of looking after yourself is very individualistic and can kind of feel a bit jarring for some people. You know, it feels at times it can feel a bit selfish to take time out for yourself, rather than thinking of it as being part of being able to be kind to others.
Absolutely. Elaine, there's been a lot of discussion in the media, or at least there was before COVID took over the news cycle, about the government's treatment of refugees and migrants. So obviously we're talking to Sophie just now about kindness for yourself, but do you think there's a role to play for kindness in government policy, and is that even possible to achieve?
Yeah, I think we have to imagine a different system, if you like. You know, we have to have hope of change, really, kind of like a utopian vision, really. But the way that the UK government treats refugees in this country is inhumane. And my background in working with in child protection, and then seeing, you know, the kind of the way that British-born children are treated compared to the way that young refugees are treated in this country, I see a huge difference. And for me, you know, it is systematic. There is, you know, a huge shift that we need to make in the way that we treat young people who arrive here vulnerable due to their circumstances. You know, we need to learn, we need to put things in place to be able to protect the most vulnerable children who fled war. And at the moment, we're so far from being there. You know, the immigration system is cruel. It's cruel to all people, you know, who claim an asylum, but particularly for children who've arrived here on their own without their family members, to be put through a system which is so complex, so long, and so traumatic. And then, I mean, I worked for the NSPCC for years, and on the helplines, you know, if you had a child that disclosed being abused to you on the phone, you would say, you know, you were trained to say, you know, I believe you, thank you for telling me. And I still feel that's one of the most important things that you can say to a survivor who's just disclosed something to you. And we're asking young refugees to disclose all that have gone through to them in 2 sessions. You know, if you're going through the immigration system, you might be with your solicitor, and then you might have to go to the Home Office. And in these couple of sessions, they have to reveal all of their life story within these sessions. And then they will probably eventually be in court with a judge who will tell them eventually that they're lying. And that, on top of the trauma that they've already gone through, is just awful. You know, why are we treating young people like that? And the whole asylum system, the way that they have to apply for asylum, is almost like putting them on trial. And this is not a more friendly way of treating young people. So yeah, the UK system has a long way to go before we're treating young people humanely through the immigration system.
Absolutely. What would your kind of first step to be? You mentioned kind of about the NSPCC, but we believe you. Would that be a good step change? What would be your first kind of point of advice for the government?
I mean, I think it's because it's so, well, I feel personally, you know, it's inherently a racist institute, the Home Office, and I feel like, you know, for that to change, it needs a whole shake-up, it needs a restructure, and the leadership needs to be more open for change. I think we have structures in place for child witnesses of abuse in this country. So if you're a child who has been sexually abused or been part of, you know, a serious domestic violence incident, there's a process of where young people or vulnerable witnesses are treated, and it's already in place. You know, that used to be part of my job a few years ago, supporting children through that, and that's completely transferable to the way that we might want to interview child refugees when they come to the UK. So you start off with belief, and you start off trying to build trust, and that's how you get the best evidence from a young person. And for a young person to be able to feel free to talk about what they've just come from, they need a safe space. So for them to support them getting asylum or to get their refugee status, they need that safe space, and at the moment they don't have that. So a lot of, you know, the UK is one of the most hardest countries to get asylum in Europe. You know, most of the young people who come through as refugees, having fled war, conflict, persecution, will not become a refugee in this country, and a lot of them will be deported at a later age. So yeah, so starting off with belief, I think, is a real, you know, important starting point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elaine. It's just so vastly important. Mo, when it comes to the world of business, obviously we looked at like how kindness to yourself, kindness in a government setting. What does kindness look like in a work setting to you?
So yeah, it's an interesting one because the culture, and I'm being really generalizing here, but the culture in a lot of companies isn't built around kindness. It's built around other things, power, control, profits, those kinds of things. So you don't, definitely in a lot of the companies I've worked in, you don't feel kindness around as something that's generally there. And I think that's the thing to look at, to think about how that can change, because if it doesn't, then what you see are more and more people actually Brighton's a great example of that. More and more people actually leave the companies they work for and just go freelance and start on their own, because they find those organisations are not kind, are not kind of places where they want to be. So it's a difficult one to nail exactly how you do that, but there is a need to shift how things are done, for sure, shift how business is done and the kind of cultures around it.
Absolutely. Sharon, I'd like to ask you a similar question as I did to Elaine. What's your view on how kindness can play a greater role in the approach that government and local authorities take to housing issues? And how would you like to see that manifest?
Crikey. That's a very big question.
Sorry, they're really big questions, aren't they?
I think in many ways, I think what we're always striving to do as a charity is always kind of evidence the effectiveness of our services that are currently commissioned, but also try and feed into an evidence base for services to be provided that aren't commissioned, looking at what the future of services could look like, and obviously doing the best we can to deliver the services now, but also having conversations about where the gaps are and where people fall through the gaps, and trying to be part of the solution rather than keep replicating and talking about the problems. And I think we do, as an organisation, we do have a really good relationship with the local authority, certainly in Brighton and Hove. I can speak more confidently about those areas because that's the area that I work most within. And I think that really helps. I think because BHT have been such a fixture in Brighton and Eastbourne and Hastings for 50 years now, I think we're able to inform part of those conversations about what can help. And I think the future of services, I think the more providers can be involved in those discussions, and because we are the ones that have the direct contact with the people that use those services, we can, if clients aren't invited to have a voice because the local authority are there and local governments there, national governments there, there's such a massive gap but actually we are the people who are working with the people. And I think that's the important role that we can play in really consulting with our clients about what has helped them, what hasn't helped them, and you kind of where we almost become the vehicle and the advocate for what they would like to change. So I think there's definitely work to be done. I mean, I think in terms of homelessness, it's quite straightforward, is that we need more accommodation. We need more accommodation for everybody, not just people with specifically mental health needs, but families, people who are homeless, people who are very vulnerably housed, people in temporary accommodation, people living in domestic violence relationships where they can't simply leave. There's a pressure on refuges. There are only so many spaces that women can access. There are some services which are gender specific, which by default then exclude people who are non-binary, who don't identify within the gender binary. And where do those people go? And there are so many kind of gaps and blocks and barriers. And I think conversations like this, where we come at things as a collective, where we share experiences, I think conversations like that really help to broaden the very necessary thing. Like I said at the beginning, is that one person has so many multiple factors, and I think accommodation is so key. I think more housing for everybody. This is a utopian dream, but it's such a fundamental right for somebody to have a home. It's such a fundamental right, and I think unless you have that platform, it's very difficult for you to build on the rest of yourself. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Ruben, just thinking of you and the work that you do, obviously in what Sharon was saying about people being excluded from, my words are not coming out at all, a specific housing and being available for people from different genders. And there's I'm sure we're all aware that there's been a lot of exclusion for the people that you work with. Where are the systems that are in place in our society that you encounter where you would like to see more kindness present?
Oh, that's an excellent question.
I'm giving you all the big
so
ones.
Broad. I mean, I think, you know, Sharon's touched on refuges and support for people in domestic violence situations, and I think, and statistically, there is a big need in the LGBT community for supported accommodation, specifically LGBT people, or for LGBT people that have experienced domestic violence, because they might not necessarily feel included in what we would describe as like mainstream services, so not non-specific LGBT services. That would be something that I would love to see. Elaine and I both work in a particular building in the centre of Brighton, the Young People Centre, and within the All Sorts team, we've discussed many times if we got funding or won the lottery or something, we would set up a supported accommodation in the Young People Centre. There would be somebody there all the time, and that's kind of a dream of lots of people that work at All Sorts, is to see a service like that set up. And who knows, we might be able to do that. And I guess with this, you know, thousands of different systems for different people and different issues that exist in the UK. And I guess it's about having the right people representing communities within those systems, so that those people's voices can be heard as best as possible. We kind of lean on certain sort of big legislation or the law at certain times if we need to. So like the UN Rights of the Child, the Equality Act, and then other sort of legislation from or best practice guidelines from the NHS and Ofsted. And I guess it is really fantastic that the government have stepped up in some way for LGBT people, so that there is legislation to fall back on. There are ways to say, you know, a term that I use is, you must do this, like you must be inclusive, so let us help you do it well. which is kind of the term I've coined over time, amongst other things, such as charm to disarm is one that I really like, is that if people, feel like they relate to somebody, they're much more likely to be open to the idea of being inclusive of more people that like that person that they're meeting. So I guess about having representation of minority communities in all this, as many systems as possible, the more likely those people are going to be able to charm to disarm other people. So I guess it's just about meaningful representation in as many spheres of life as possible, and that's for ethnic minorities, for like not that women are a minority group, but an equalities group, proper representation for women, proper representation for LGBT people, amongst others. It's people with disabilities. It's really critical to ensure that happens. And then that's another thing, is that if you're LGBT or you're part of one minority group, we don't live single issue lives. We are people that are multi-layered, and we experience lots of different conflicts with our identity. So if you are Black and LGBT, you're going to have a different experience to somebody who's white and LGBT. Or if English isn't your first language, or if you have immigration related issues, like the young people that Elaine works with, the way the world looks and functions is so different depending on our intersectional identities. And it's so critical to acknowledge that we aren't one type of person. We are all multiple layers of our identities and experiences, and make up the way that we see the world. So I guess understanding that and being kind, going back to the theme, is so important. Understanding that me as a trans person, I'm going to have a different experience to a trans woman who's Black. In the US, I mean, there's not statistics like this that exist for the UK, but in the US, you have a 1 in 12 chance of being murdered if you're a Black trans woman. So these are, significant statistics. And there's a memorial event every year for trans people that have been murdered across the globe because of their gender identity. And seeing the way that hurts the community in the UK, even though violence towards trans people is much less prevalent in the UK, or LGBT people in general, compared to other countries. There's been a steady increase of hate crime towards, in all areas since I think the Brexit vote saw a significant rise. I see Mo nodding, so I'm glad I'm quoting that accurately. That shows that there maybe is even like a political shift in the way that people see difference. And I think it's important to kind of reconnect with who are we at the core, who are we as individuals, and actually our similarities transcend differences like ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc. Time and time again. So it's about refocusing, I guess. How can we be kind and connect on a human level beyond our differences?
Ruben, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this is a really good opportunity now to kind of like open it up to all of you as a group. So just a general question to all of you. What are the biggest barriers to kindness in our society at the moment? Obviously, Ruben's touched on a few. Anyone's jumping at the bit?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think I can sort of speak from my own kind of experiences. So what Ruben was talking about, whatever, I don't know what people's politics are, but since the Brexit vote, I think there has been a kind of unkind feeling towards immigrants, and that's undeniable. As somebody who's brown, I can tell you that has definitely been the case. And if we're going to be kinder as a society, and I've been very guilty of this myself, I'm going to have to be kind to people that might have had a different opinion to me. We're going to have to come together somehow to address this. And in my utopian view, has this crisis where we have all had to come together, has it made a difference? I don't know. It's an interesting debate. I've been following avidly what's been going on with the NHS workers and the migrant surcharge and those things. I'm from a family of immigrants. Many people work in the NHS, and I've really been watching what's been going on with that. So I'm not convinced that it's going to lead to more kindness, but I feel like we are going to all have to reach out to each other, even if we don't agree with each other, for there to be a kinder society. And I say that as somebody who hasn't done that very well since 2016, and I know I need to do that better too.
No, that's a really interesting argument in the modern time of whether with social media and things can spread like wildfire, whether we do give a voice to people who might even be perceived as hateful, and whose views most society would say are abhorrent. And do we just go, no, don't involve those people, or do we include them in a conversation?
Yeah, it's difficult. It really is. I mean, I have to say that for the sake of my own mental health, I've had to stay away from people that have those kinds of opinions, just because it's about self-preservation. I kind of feel maybe now I'm starting to feel a bit more robust, that I might be able to reach out beyond that. But I guess we're going to have to accept that there are these different views in our society and these different opinions, and maybe it's about trying to understand why people do feel that way to help us reach out. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but it might be something to do with that we need to kind of think about why people have felt like that, and why they've had those opinions.
Elaine, I was kind of looking to you a little bit. Oh, sorry, did I
was just thinking, it was just really, a lot of what you say is so sensible, Mary. There's something really profound about the inequality in society associated with that greater level of hostility and that othering that somebody mentioned earlier, that it feels like that actually the more we can be sort of all have the same opportunities and all have housing and all have employment, less of that nastiness is there, less of that kind of seeing people as other and different and, you know, being hostile. It really cuts through that. In some ways it strikes me, I think you're right about what you said about the COVID response. It's quite mixed. it's not all brilliant, but there is something about, because it is a bit more of a level playing field, and clearly there's a race element there. There is a massive issue for us about our Black and Asian staff in the NHS that are succumbing to the virus, but broadly it's a virus that everybody has to respond to and deal with. And there's something about that leveling together, you know, sort of bringing people together, that I think maybe fosters that spirit of being able to reach out to each other. Or while we're able to live in our own little bubble and just do our own thing, that we can be more hostile or more critical of people who aren't like us.
I think there's definitely something in that, and I think something really significant is the role that social media can play
exactly.
It can do so much good. There can be so many amazing things that happen as a result of people being more connected, and really good things, fundraising, things can really gain momentum and real traction, and amazing things can happen. But then equally, a barrier to kindness can be how easy it is for somebody to sit there and write really harmful, hurtful things and retweet something which is so loaded and so powerful, and people who haven't necessarily formed their own opinion and judgment about something so loaded and political can then end up getting into the eye of a storm that they didn't really understand. I think there's definitely a social media, particularly now, that can be such a brilliant thing, but then also can be so dangerous.
But doesn't that remoteness allow us to other more effectively? If you're actually living with people that are different to you, you're going to find things that connect you. But if you're hearing it on Twitter, somebody anonymous that you're never going to meet, it's much easier to respond in quite a hateful or aggressive way, which is really damaging. And I don't think it's insignificant that it's happening particularly to groups that ordinarily get oppressed. So it's not just being hateful to everybody, it's being hateful to groups that ordinarily experience that hate in real life.
Yeah.
Good point to stop there. Sorry, Beth.
No, not at all.
Thinking actually we're talking about kindness, and it's quite interesting what is going on social media, and you know, again, that real balance, isn't there, between some people really reaching out to each other and setting up online deliveries of food or whatever it is, and at the same time there are other people really being very aggressive and hostile.
Yeah, I'm in a group which is the Women of Colour Brighton group, and when I joined it, I didn't even know there were that many women of colour in Brighton. Really didn't know at all. And before, obviously before lockdown, we used to meet once a month, and you know, the solidarity has been amazing, and you know, that group online has been fantastic as well, because it is kindness, it's solidarity, sharing experiences. It's been quite a powerful thing.
And I think kind of like,
Sorry, go on.
oh, sorry.
No. I was going to ask you, Elaine. I'm sure I want to hear exactly what you had already planned in your brain, but about sharing with lots of different voices and kind of the where education and awareness comes into it. And I was going to ask you specifically, Elaine, and Ruben, working with young people. But first, I wanted to hear what you had to say.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I think kindness is within everyone. I think there's a minority of people who are hateful and angry, and there's, you know, lots of reasons why people are like that. But I think like leading by example, by showing kindness, inspires people. I think that's how our project began in 2015. You know, it began as a small group of volunteers, and, you know, kind of giving people a platform to be able to show kindness and solidarity, and give people permission as well. You know, the whole lockdown, people checking in the neighbours, you know, people have seen other people. It's kind of becoming normal, saying, oh, have you checked on your neighbours? If you know, if you're going shopping, are you going to ask if that person needs anything? And there's been a massive movement for people supporting each other, and it's in everybody. And I think, you know, by being openly kind and leading by example, it kind of inspires other people. And I think if you're in a privileged place to have a following like an organization might have, or an influencer or whoever, you know, by showing being kind as being the norm, I think that does inspire other people. Yeah, that's what I was kind of going to say. I think there is hate in the world as there is kindness, but I think, you know, largely, and this might be me just being an eternal optimist, I think, you know, kindness is much bigger. There's a lot more in the world than there is hate. It's just, you know, when it pierces through with some awful comments, you know, that kind of sticks, and that's what we remember. But certainly we've seen a lot of amazing acts of kindness over the last 5 years of running the Hummingbird Project that has been enabled by just having a platform there for people to be able to reach out and help. And once it feels more easy to do, if there is a platform like these organising groups, the COVID, you know, mutual aid groups, you know, once you can see how you can help, people usually do and want to.
Ruben, has that been your experience with the work that you've done before? That is overall is kindness that your young people have experienced?
Well, I think an amazing act of kindness that comes to mind is the army of volunteers that we have that support us to run our services, that without their kindness and without them dedicating that time and commitment to want to support our young people, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be able to function in the way that we do. And I think, you know, no one that works in the third sector does it for the money. There's got to be something else that, you know, pushes us all forward as our sort of professional drivers. But I think, yeah, I have a real respect for the volunteers that we work with that do it for nothing just because they believe it to be the right thing. And I have seen that kind of kindness around COVID. There's someone else that turned out to be a youth worker that I'd never met that lives on my street, and he set up a sort of a neighborhood WhatsApp group, and I know my neighbors so much better than I did before, and it's really lovely, and I feel like something that's going to be meaningful going into the future. And it's I feel like I've really seen the real kind of human kind positive stuff when it comes to this virus, and you know, everyone's posting rainbows on their windows and sort of thanking the NHS, and it's really brought people together in sort of this really critical time. But it's been awesome, really. It's been gorgeous to see.
We've actually got quite a lot of questions from our YouTube chat, so
amazing.
Those quickly, but just wanted to wrap up. So what can we do as a society? We all come from different areas and we all have different expertise, but what are the sort of first steps to overcoming those barriers to kindness? I'll give you all a bit of thinking time.
Well, I'm really struck by some of the benefits that we're seeing, certainly in the NHS, is the greater joining together of organisations. And there's many of us who work in the NHS who've long wanted to do that, and there often felt like barriers and difficulties with kind of collaboration. It feels like actually at the moment we're in a world where people are just going, no, we just got to get on and collaborate. We've just got to work together. We've all got the same end point that we're trying to reach to. We're trying to look after people who are vulnerable. So let's, use each other, support each other, work together. So I'm really struck by the importance of that, which is in a way, it's really nice, Beth, that you brought us all together today. It's a good sort of example, isn't it, of the importance of bringing together different people with very different experiences in the groups that they're looking after, but we're all united by the same aim, that we want to be supporting those that are more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've always thought is organisations looking at the training package that they provide to their staff, and often it's very much based on the organisation and the values and the objectives of the organisation. So the training is very much about people doing their jobs, and it's quite kind of restricted, whereas actually going on training which is less obvious, like mental health awareness training, suicide awareness training, trans awareness training, which you don't need to have to do your job, but where you go there and then your mind is then kind of expanded, and then also that could affect the conversations that you have with your friends, and it kind of becomes then word of mouth, and someone around the table then knows something about mental health because they've been on training. And definitely talking about suicide, definitely talking about mental health. It doesn't have to just be people who work in those services that should be having those conversations, because suicide, mental health, LGBT issues around refugees, that it's everybody, it's society. And I think organizations really looking at their training package and thinking, actually our people working here also are people in society, so what training can we provide to expand their mind, so society becomes everybody's concern. That's definitely something I have found in training I've been on, that's been less obvious training for me to go on. I've come back to my workplace and talked to people about it. HIV awareness training is another one. It's amazing. And the more we have training like that, the richer our conversations will be in work and also outside of work with our friends and our families.
Yeah, I'd really agree with that. And I think in people in the business community, in Brighton particularly, but I know it's not just Brighton, there's been a real community around that. Lots of online events have sprung up, lots of groups have come together, people that wouldn't necessarily maybe talk to each other normally. And you've seen a lot of kind of acceptance of difference. So because everyone's working from home, you get this window into everyone's lives. I'm seeing it now with all of you. And you do have, a cat. Reuben, I think you had a cat appear there, or a child that wants to say hello. They just want to see what's going on and say hello. And I think we've become more accepting that it's not this rigid kind of workplace. We've understood each other more through this. My fear is that doesn't continue. So I think there's a real impetus for everyone to drive change through this, because what we want to do from this is to come out from this as a better, kinder place, so that we don't just go back to where things were. That's what I hope anyway.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah, I was going to add, like, setting a culture of kindness, whether that be in your workplace or whether that be in your home. So it's like starting with you, just checking in on people and just like doing it straight away. If you're checking in with your colleagues or your staff or in your family home, just making those phone calls, you'll never regret it. Just saying, oh, how are you? Just making some time, and I think as long as you're always, kind of leading by example, I think, you'll try and influence the environment around you.
Something else that I think is not doing that real classic or stereotypical British thing, is to say, somebody asks you if you're okay, and even if you're having a terrible time, just saying you're fine. Yeah. It's true, isn't it? And actually, we've been talking a lot about self-kindness, which I think is so critical and important, and something that I learned in my youth work career very early on, which is, if I'm completely burnt out, I'm no use to anybody. So and being better at asking for help if I need it. And I think as people that provide services for others, it's very easy to kind of end up in that role of being the caregiver or the person that sorts things out for others, or whatever else it could be, but actually kind of expecting or hoping for that kind of kindness and care for others, for ourselves, is also really important. Kind of not getting trapped in that role of being only the carer, or only the rescuer, or only the parent, or whatever role there is, but also being okay to say, actually, can you help me do this thing, or I'm really not well, can you get me some rice? It's like that was all my neighbour wanted, was some brown rice, and we couldn't get it at the time, but the next time we could get it, we delivered us some brown rice, and she was very pleased. So it doesn't take very much, does it, to look out for each other? So yeah, so kindness, brown rice.
Thank you so much, Ruben. I'm going to go to some questions now. I don't know why brown rice was like the thing that nobody could get hold of. It was like flour.
I
found that. So this is a question to everybody, and they're just coming. So whoever wants to grab it. During this pandemic, there's been a lot of innovation. What have you each witnessed in your own sector that has come out of this difficult time?
I'm happy to start with that one. So the biggest thing is that everybody can work remotely. So companies that said it wasn't possible they've had no choice. It works. Companies that said flexible hours aren't possible have had to make it work, because if someone's looking after their child, they can't sit at their computer all day, and so it's had to work, and work has got done. It's definitely got done. So there's been innovation in how people have done things, and companies have adapted really quickly to that.
Yeah,
I think we've seen lots of different innovations. One of the ones that springs to mind is the army delivering PPE stock to one of our managers at her home, because she's working from home. The services she oversees, there are 8 different properties, so the army deliver it to her house, and then she takes it to the services. I mean, that in itself is brilliant. So she gets PPE delivered to her door. And St. Peter's Church have been incredible. They've been delivering food to the people who live in some of our accommodation-based services. And while they're there, they're asking a bit more about the services that we operate, the kind of people that we support. And they're asking lots of questions, and they're going, oh, didn't know you did all of this. So just conversations where people who've never known about what organisations do and how things work, and asking really simple questions, has been a real, just a joy.
Great. Anybody else?
I think something that Mo was saying about remote working is super true. Is that I think something that all companies and potential organizations of all types will take away is that there is such a significant barrier for people with different disabilities to access employment. And actually with remote working, it shows that even if you cannot travel to an office, even if you've got mobility issues or whatever else might be happening for somebody, that remote working is possible. And I don't think that the private or public sector will be the same after this. What's the phrase? There's a phrase, isn't there, that necessity is the mother of innovation, or something like that.
Yeah.
There's so many organizations have been forced to change the way that they work. I don't think that, all sorts will be the same moving forward. We've really looked at the success of our online service, and there are lots of young people that can't pay for their own travel to our services, or live in a rural area, or can't get a lift because they're not out to their parents, or whatever else might be happening for that young person. So actually setting up an online group that will continue once lockdown finishes is an aim of ours, that we will continue what we've learned from this. And it shows that youth work is doable through a screen. It might not always be the same, but they're doing arts and crafts. They're showing what they've been up to over the week. They're talking about kindness. They're talking about mental health, and really just providing a platform from whatever we could do. And I say we as in the royal we, through a screen is better than not doing it at all. So it's been amazing for me to be a part of that. And to be honest, I've also got lots of dedicated youth volunteers that aren't currently at university or working or at college that I've been able to utilise loads. So I've had lots of Zoom calls and work that I've been doing with them, which has been fantastic.
That is amazing. I'm going to do 2 more questions, because I realised I've just been so engrossed in everyone. I've just been, it's 3:07 and we were meant to finish at 3. I'm going to do a couple more questions and then let you all move on with your lives. Sharon, there was a question specifically for you. How have you found that homeless people have been struggling more under lockdown, or not at all?
I think a really significant thing that happened with people who are homeless is that the local authority were able to secure them accommodation in hotels, which I think was amazing. How much we've been talking about homelessness, particularly in Brighton, how visible homelessness has been for certainly the last couple of years, and then how quickly, you know, fortunately, the hotels were then empty, and through some amazing work that happened very, very quickly, homeless people were placed into hotel accommodation. And I think in lots of ways that solved one issue. It gave people a sense of stability. But again, people being individuals, some people really benefited from the solitude and the space and the comfort that brought. Other people found it incredibly difficult from having lived a life that was quite transient, with some people regarding the street as what they're familiar with, and some people found it difficult. Also, some homeless people have dogs which couldn't then go into the hotel. I understand that some people were kind of feeling quite isolated. So I think it's very person specific. I think it would be interesting actually to speak to some of the people who were placed in hotels. I haven't had those conversations myself, so I don't know. But I know from colleagues of mine who work more closely with the people that were accommodating in the hotels. I think it's for some people it's been incredible, and for some people it has brought additional challenges. And of course, then the question is then what happens next? You know. But that's the question post-COVID. What generally will anything look like? So I think there was lots of innovation, lots of really good things happened incredibly quickly. It was very impressive work. Certainly the local authority sent Mungos, acted incredibly quickly. It was amazing. But yeah, I'm sure it provided security and comfort to lots of people at a time that would otherwise have been incredibly difficult for them. You can't stay at home if you don't have a home, and people would continue to be as vulnerable as they are, if not more so. So yeah, it was I would say it was a good thing, but I'm not one of the people that were accommodated, so I don't know for sure.
Thank you. Just going to quite a lot of people have been asking how so like Ruben, people have been asking how people can get involved. Elaine, people are saying how can people of Brighton help refugees in Brighton. So I think that the easiest way, just to wrap up with the last question, is how everybody can get involved and learn a little bit more about what you're all up to. Maybe starting with Ruben.
Sure. So we've actually got quite a good website. So if you Google All Sorts Brighton, or go to our website, which is allsortsyouth.org.uk, you can see more about what we do. There's a donate button. There's a way to get in touch with me if you are interested in volunteering with the project. If maybe you're an organisation that wants to donate services or food for our groups or resources, or you want to come and run a workshop on yoga or mindfulness for our young people, then do get in touch, because we're always open to being involved with the community. So yeah, first port of call is to check out the website and then kind of go from there.
Great. Mo, how can we keep up to date with what you're up to next?
Yeah, so we're very early days for us. We're just starting out, but actually one of the things we do want to do is work with organisations as well. So I'll be coming back to all of you, because one of the things we want to look at is how we can get a wider range of people into the workplace, into different roles, and look at ways that we can do that and kind of help people along the way.
Great. Sharon, how can we get involved with Brighton Housing Trust?
So similar to Ruben, we have got a website, www.bht.org.uk, and we do have a COVID-19 fundraising appeal. Like many organisations, we've had to cancel 2 rather large fundraising events, which usually bring us in approximately £30,000 a year, which we won't have this year. So far we've raised £7,000, and we would like to for people to donate more. We also have a Facebook page and a Twitter page, and also Instagram. We haven't reached the dizzy heights of TikTok yet.
You should be on TikTok, Sharon, for sure.
You never know. You should. That may be the next one. But yes, the BHT website would be the first port of call.
Great. Elaine?
So yeah, I guess like all charities right now, you know, the biggest need for us is financial. We've lost a whole load of income through a lot of the events being cancelled this year, fundraising events, which is a huge shame. So of course, like other organisations, if you can donate to us, that would be amazing. You can just go to our website, hummingbirdproject.org.uk, and just press donate onto there. I would also say, you know, if you do want to support like the emergency funding, which is going out to individuals, like feeding individuals in the community, our partners, 1,000 for 1,000 and also Brighton Voices in Exile are doing an incredible job at distributing food and necessities to the most vulnerable refugees in our community. So I also have to kind of big up their work and kind of highlight them. But if you are kind of concerned about young refugees and you do want to help, I always say the first thing that you can do is educate yourself. You can do that by checking out our Facebook, our website, but largely our Facebook. We're always sharing educational pieces just to help keep you informed. We're always sharing campaigns that we feel are really important. We don't share everything. We read through everything that we do share. So just educate yourself, and then you've got the chance to educate others, and that will dispel myths and stereotypes that we see and hear about all the time with young refugees. And then stand with us if you can, if we are campaigning, if we are, you know, talking about a particular issue, join us on that. And you can do that by signing campaigns and just keeping an eye on Facebook.
Great. And Sophie, obviously you're not here representing a charity or a trust, but nearly trust.
Partnership Trust is the organisation I work for, and I have to say that we've had a lot of people expressing an interest in working for the NHS since the kind of COVID crisis, and we would really welcome interest and applications from people who are thinking about a change of career perhaps, or particularly from people who are kind. We're always keen to employ people who are kind. So if you are listening or hearing this, I would be really encouraging you to look on NHS jobs, because we're a big employer across Sussex. And there are the acute trusts as well as the mental health trust, but you know, there is an awful lot of opportunities for people who are looking perhaps for a different kind of employment opportunity, and the, you know, that re-evaluation what a lot of people are doing at the moment, thinking about what's important to them. And actually it comes back to, you know, many people want to care and be kind to others, and if that is what you really want to do, there are ways of doing that and working for an organisation like Sussex Partnership. So a bit of a plug there. Come and work for us.
That is great. And you know what, that so many people are really, like you say, re-evaluating what's important. Yeah. We've all had, well, a lot of people who are able to work from home have had the chance to just have a bit more space.
Exactly. And I think something about thinking about how the world is changing, and we may actually see quite a lot of changes to employment. Touched on that earlier with home working and flexible working. We've always been supportive of home working and flexible working within the NHS. That's, you know, we recognise the importance of looking after staff before all of this happened. That will continue. I think it's really be really nice to think about people choosing to come and work in the caring professions, and the caring professions actually being held up as somewhere of value and importance, rather than the sort of denigration we've seen over many years.
Well, that's a really good way to wrap up. I'm just going to give you, like, very quickly, does anybody have any other final words about building kindness into the fabric of society? Great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. This has been such an enlightening and exciting conversation, and it's just great to have such a wide variety of voices in one conversation. So thank you to everyone also who's joined us live or watched the recording. We do hope that this has inspired you to make kindness a bigger part of your contribution to society, and you can start with one of these groups. And we're going to be carrying on this conversation after Mental Health Awareness Week, because it's not just 1 week of the year that we have to be thinking about these things. So we're going to be continuing to publish blogs and resources on this topic. And you can share ideas and information with us at the projects on our social media, and we'll be signposting to all of these lovely people here. But from all of us who are on this panel, we obviously want you to make sure that you do take care of your well-being, especially during this difficult time, and also the well-being of others, because as we've so importantly highlighted, it's like of great importance to kind of look after everybody here. So Stay safe, have a lovely weekend, and thank you all so much to all of you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Beth.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.